Have you ever asked yourself why someone's silent behavior toward you feels more powerful than words? And why being avoided can linger in your mind longer than being openly rejected? Human psychology is wired this way. Our brains search for meaning in absence, in distance, in the unexplained, and that is exactly why this story matters to you. She avoided him every day, not with insults, not with cruelty you could point at, but with something far more unsettling: quiet dismissal. And here's the truth. Most people don't talk about avoidance is not neutral. It sends a message. It says, I see you, and I've decided you don't deserve space near me. For women especially, this kind of avoidance often feels justified, even protective, because society teaches you that distance equals safety. But psychology tells a deeper story. When you repeatedly avoid someone, you aren't just protecting yourself. You are reinforcing an image in your mind, story about who they are, without ever testing whether that story is true. Men notice this far more than you think. They notice the seat you don't take, the glance you don't return, the way your body shifts when they come close. And here's the uncomfortable part. The more mysterious and unreachable you appear, the more some men obsess not because of desire alone, but because the human mind fixates on what feels withheld. Avoidance creates a vacuum, and obsession often rushes in to fill it. But obsession is not power, and distance is not always wisdom. As a therapist would gently remind you, patterns repeated daily turn into beliefs. She avoided him every day, and with each repetition, she convinced herself that her avoidance was justified, even righteous. Yet the cost of that habit was subtle. It narrowed her ability to see clearly, to judge fairly, to remain emotionally flexible. There is also a lesson here about control. Avoiding someone can feel like control, like you are managing your environment and your emotions. But over time, that control begins to control you. You become hyper-aware, tense, always calculating routes and exits. That constant vigilance drains you. It hardens you. And it can quietly teach you to distrust your own capacity to handle discomfort. The title tells us something powerful. She avoided him every day, but what silenced her came later. Silence is what prejudice feeds on, but it's also what shatters it when reality finally breaks through. Avoidance delays truth. It never prevents it. If men obsess when they feel unseen, the healthiest response is not to feed that dynamic with more distance, but to ground yourself in clarity. You are not responsible for someone else's feelings, but you are responsible. For your patterns, ask yourself, am I avoiding because of real danger or because of an inherited fear, a stereotype, a story I never questioned? Growth begins there. Emotional maturity is not about being agreeable, it's about being conscious. When you act from awareness instead of assumption, protect yourself without dehumanizing others. And here's the most important part, spoken to you as gently and firmly as a therapist would. You don't need avoidance to be powerful. Your power is in discernment, in boundaries that are clear, and in the courage to let reality speak louder than fear. She avoided him every day, and that avoidance felt safe until one moment revealed how small that safety really was. Let this story remind you that true strength isn't in who you shut out, but in how honestly you face the world, even when it challenges what you thought you knew. Have you ever wondered why someone else's calm in the face of rejection can feel more unsettling than anger, and why quiet restraint often holds more power than confrontation? This is where the title deepens. She avoided him every day, and he noticed everything. Not just her absence, but the intention behind it. He noticed the way she stiffened, the way her eyes slid past him, the way her silence carried judgment. And here's what many women don't realize. Men feel these signals intensely, even when they say nothing. The human mind is wired to search for patterns, and when a man senses consistent avoidance, his thoughts don't simply disappear. For some, it creates obsession. Not romantic obsession alone, but a fixation on being misunderstood, on wanting to correct an image they never chose. What made his response powerful was not submission and not retaliation, dignity. He chose restraint, and restraint is psychologically disarming. When someone you expect to react with anger instead responds with steadiness, your assumptions lose their footing. As a therapist would explain, dignity interrupts prejudice because it doesn't confirm the story you've been telling yourself. She avoided him every day, expecting distance to keep her safe, but his calm forced her to sit with her own discomfort. Silence met silence, but his silence carried self-respect, not fear. For women, this is an important lesson about influence. Men obsess more when they feel emotionally blocked, yet the healthiest thing you can do is not to manipulate that dynamic. Obsession grows in uncertainty. Clarity weakens it. When you remain grounded, observant, and emotionally regulated, stop feeding stories that exist only in someone else's head. His dignity did that. It showed her that power does not belong to the one who avoids, but to the one who stays centered. There is also a deeper mirror here. When someone refuses to react, it invites reflection. She could no longer justify her avoidance by labeling him as a threat because his behavior contradicted her belief. Psychology calls this cognitive dissonance. The mind struggles when reality doesn't match expectation. That struggle is where change begins. Avoidance had protected her from questioning herself. His dignity removed that protection. So what should you do when you sense someone watching you, thinking about you, obsessing in silence? Don't escalate it with cruelty or games. Lead with clarity, boundaries, and inner calm. Yes. You don't owe anyone access, but you owe yourself integrity. The title reminds us that she avoided him every day, but it was his quiet strength that shifted everything. Let that be your takeaway. True safety and true power come not from avoidance, but from the ability to remain composed, conscious, and humanivant when it would be easier to turn away. Have you ever noticed how one unexpected moment can undo years of assumptions, and how the mind changes faster through experience than through argument? This is where the title reaches its turning point. She avoided him every day, until one moment forced her to see him not as an idea, but as a human being. Psychology teaches us that stereotypes survive because they remain abstract. As long as someone stays distant, the mind fills the gap with fear, stories, and inherited beliefs. Her avoidance made him a shadow. But the moment something went wrong, and he stepped forward without hesitation, the shadow disappeared. And in that instant, her brain had to update its story. For women, this moment matters deeply because it exposes a quiet truth. When a man acts with grounded humanity rather than performance, it disrupts both fear and obsession. Men often obsess when they feel unseen or misjudged, when they sense they are being reduced to something smaller than they are. What silenced her wasn't heroism or drama, it was normal decency offered without expectation. No eye contact demanded. No approval sought. That lack of agenda is what made it powerful. As a therapist would say, authenticity dissolves projection. You cannot keep fearing someone who shows up simply as themselves. This is also a lesson about emotional safety. Many women believe safety comes from distance, but psychology shows that safety is often restored through clarity. When someone behaves in a way that contradicts your fear, your nervous system recalibrates. Her body realized before her mind did that the threat she imagined didn't exist. And once the nervous system calms, obsession on both sides loses oxygen. Drama feeds fixation. Calm reality starves it. So what should you do when someone's presence unsettles you, or when you sense attention you didn't ask for? Pause before you avoid. Ask whether your reaction is rooted in evidence or assumption. You are allowed to protect yourself, but protection doesn't require dehumanization. When you allow reality to speak through actions, not labels you give yourself, the gift of emotional accuracy, that accuracy keeps you powerful, composed, free. The title reminds us that she avoided him every day. But one moment of unfiltered humanity silenced everything she thought she knew. Let this be your reminder. Real strength is not in clinging to fear, and real peace is not found in distance alone. It's found when you allow truth, quiet, ordinary, human truth to replace the stories that never served you in the first place. Have you ever felt more exposed by someone's quiet goodness than you would by their criticism? and wondered why silence can sometimes feel heavier than words. This is the moment where the title tightened. She avoided him every day. And what he did next didn't shame her publicly, it confronted her privately. When he acted without resentment, without pointing out her behavior, it left her alone with herself. Psychology tells us that embarrassment fades quickly, but self-awareness lingers. His action didn't attack her identity, it illuminated it. And that is why it silenced her. For women, this moment is deeply instructive. Men often obsess when they feel accused without evidence, when they sense judgment but are never given a chance to contradict it. By refusing to react defensively, he removed the battle she expected. There was nothing to argue against, no anger to justify her fear. In therapy, this is called a mirror moment, when someone's calm behavior reflects your own internal bias back to you. Avoidance had protected her from seeing herself clearly. His restraint took that protection away. What should you do when you realize your behavior might be shaping someone else's fixation or misunderstanding? Pause, not in guilt, but in honesty. Obsession grows where tension is unspoken. It weakens where awareness enters. When you acknowledge your assumptions internally, you stop feeding the cycle. You don't need to apologize out loud to grow. You need to adjust how you move forward. Safety and compassion can coexist. The title ends with silence for a reason. She avoided him every day, but silence arrived only when truth replaced fear. Let this be your takeaway. The most powerful shifts don't come from confrontation, but from quiet integrity. When you choose awareness over avoidance, you reclaim your emotional authority, and that kind of power never needs to announce itself.